What's going on, guys, and welcome to Military Cashflow. What's going on with you, Mike? How you doing?
Man, living my best life, man. We're doing a lot of deals, and I'm working on that move to Charlotte, man. We're working on that move, man. So well, obviously by the time this records, I should already be there. But yeah, we're going out there. So for any investors trying to meet me up in Charlotte, North Carolina, let me know, man. We got Pints of Properties rolling. Yeah, let us know. What about you, man?
We're about to do a lot of things out there. So
Oh,
you're
yeah.
about to do a lot of things out there. So
It's
I'm
gonna
really
be fun.
excited for you, man. I'm really excited for you. So me, I'm still overseas right now. I'm just kind of hanging out. The cool thing is I have my wife here with me, so
Yep.
that's pretty cool. Right now we have a few months before we go back to the States, and we're looking at duplexes to buy back in Savannah. So if you're
Nice.
watching this, if you got some pocket listings or something like that, we're gonna do the whole house hacking. We've talked several times about buying a home, we renovate the home, and then Airbnb the other side out or rent the other side out, and I get to keep all my BAH. Well, both of us get to keep all our BAH, so it's a freaking super win, super wealth build, so that's what we're working on right now, and we're just going through the analysis phase pretty much. So
Right.
that's what we're working on right now. And that's pretty much it, man.
So you guys are basically on vacation because you're with the missus. Yeah. Yeah. Like just on a European vacation. And then, that Savannah market is amazing out there. So we're excited to see, how that's going to turn out. And I'll tell you what, one thing that we do, guys, is for everybody listening, we love to network, right? So here in Fayetteville, we host the Pints of Properties. When I get to Charlotte, we're going to host the Pints of Properties. And I'm hoping in Savannah we can start Pints of Properties. But if you guys are looking for anything, our events, our books, our content, our tools, our courses, you can find everything on militarycashflow.com. Right. And so by the time this airs, we should have, a lot of stuff going on this, but definitely check that out. Yeah, but
today's episode, we are going to be discussing some awesome things. We're talking about the military apartment investing journey. Yeah. So there's a lot to us. Mike, you want to touch on some of that?
Yeah, man. Brian covers so much about his journey. First off, starting with taking missions to another country and how that led him to the military somehow. And then miraculously, through his journey in the military, he decided, hey, apartments is going to be the way out. And guys, he's going to cover how he bought 4 properties, over 168 doors in less than 2 years. So I know you guys are tired of hearing us talking, so let's jump right to it.
What's going on, guys? This is Dan Wynn.
And Mike Glaspie.
And welcome to Military Cashflow. Hey, today we got a special guest. We got Brian Briscoe, Mr. Brian Briscoe on the line with us with Four Oaks Capital. He's coming on. He's going to tell his story. Brian, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? Give us a little bit about your background, where you're from, what you do, and things like that.
Yeah, sure thing. Right now I'm a Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel working at the Pentagon. And since this is a military, cash flow podcast, I'll highlight that part first. But right now I'm a foreign area officer. I'm a Latin American foreign area officer. So basically anything that, headquarters Marine Corps intersects with, South America or Central America, North America, I'm involved in that. So that's where I'm at right now. I was born and raised in the Salt Lake City area, went to the University of Utah, got 2 degrees there. Took a small break from school when I was 19 to serve a mission for my church, and wanted to be a college professor for the longest time. So ever since I was, probably 15 years old, I thought, I want to be I like teaching. I want to be a college professor. I kind of decided that early on, and started putting all my eggs in that basket. So bachelor's degree in math, master's degree in math, and decided I wanted to get a PhD in math. Along the way, kind of funny. I mean, I had this, one of those aha moments, the little light bulb going off. If you've ever been to college and you look at your math professors, they're really smart is what I'll say. They're just very smart, and I kind of looked around and I'm like, I want their job, but I don't want to be like any of these guys. I like them. They're good people and they know a lot and they're good teachers, but I don't want to be like them. And in the back of my head, I thought, if I do exactly what they did, I will end up being like they are. And that kind of scared me. And I thought, okay, I need to do something besides, sit around, math professors telling, jokes about, stupid math concepts, But so I started looking at the reserves. And, I thought, okay, this is a broadening experience. It's going to exercise a lot more than my brain. I'll be more physically challenged. I'll be, my leadership abilities will be challenged. And I'll be able to give back to the country. So got into the Marine Corps Reserves, was a 92-day reservist, which means I went to boot camp, did not go to an MOS school, and went to boot camp, and I went straight back to college. Started a PhD program at the University of Minnesota. And this was August 2001. So late August 2001, I checked into to the PhD program. And I remember September 7th, 2001, I was checking into my reserve unit. It was a Friday. Okay. And I go to the first sergeant. I'm PFC Briscoe at the time, so quite frankly, I didn't know the difference between officer and enlisted, so I didn't know that a college degree would let me go to OCS and be an officer. And frankly, I didn't know the difference between, being a PFC and a second lieutenant at the time. I did it after boot camp, but, PFC Briscoe goes into the first sergeant's office with his check-in sheet, and he starts asking me questions. He's like, what are you going to school for? I'm like, well, I'm in a PhD program. He drops his pencil and he looks at me. He's like, you're what? I'm like, yeah, I'm in a PhD program. He's like, are you serious? He's like, you're freaking PFC. I'm like, yeah, I'm in a PhD program. He's like, why are you not an officer? And I'm like, because I just wanted to be a Marine first sergeant. It was just like, I never really thought of that. And he literally handed me my check-in sheet back, wrote on a Post-it a phone number. He's like, this is the number of the officer selection office. He's like, before I sign your check-in sheet, you need to go talk to these guys. He's like, don't worry. They're about a 15-minute drive away. No problem. You get there, get back, and we can get things taken care of. So, long story short, at the end of the conversation with the officer selection officer, he asked me a question. He's like, would you rather be a Marine officer or a college professor? I looked at him. I said, college professor. Done. Got my check-in sheet signed and went about my merry way. And obviously, Tuesday, September 11th, changed a lot of things. Shortly after that date, I called the officer selection officer back up and it said, hey, you remember me? Like, yeah, I remember you. I'm like, I changed my mind. I want to come down and fill out the paperwork. So I filled out the paperwork to go to OCS, to go active duty, and, the rest is history. So, been active duty since roughly January 2002 is when I started OCS. And, right now I'm about a year away from retirement. When you squeeze all my reserve time in, I'll retire. I'll be on terminal leave this time next year. So
that's awesome. Well,
yeah.
So to kind of go back a little bit, I have to do this. You said math jokes, and it reminds me of the Key and Peele High on Popularness.
Yeah.
All the guys that get it is going to get that one. Hey, sorry. I had to.
I mean, there's a lot of math jokes that I would love to tell you guys, but you probably wouldn't. I mean,
we wouldn't get it. We wouldn't get it.
I mean, my sister-in-law has this great shirt. She's got a couple degrees in physics. It has what are called Maxwell's equations on it. And the Maxwell's equations govern light and how light propagates, and there's 4 equations, and it says, and God said, and then there's the equations, and there was light, so it was just one of those, like, God's a mathematician. I thought it was hilarious, but you guys are looking at me like, I've got the third eye on my forehead, but
that's a perfect dad joke. That's a perfect.
It's just one of those where, you got a bunch of equations, people who know, look at it and laugh. Yeah. People who don't know, look at it and like, that's the dumbest shirt I've ever seen.
Yeah, we're gonna have some people out there listening to the show like, dude, I thought this was supposed to be our real estate. What are these guys talking about?
And there's gonna be one guy that's just like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Crying and laughing.
Yeah. So
you went through a lot, and to cover a few different things. One thing that you hit on that kind of happens more often than not is there's people that join the military for the simple fact that they want to, maybe travel, they want to explore, they want to get that college benefit to help with their education. But nobody, the recruiter's supposed to, but nobody really guides them through their options. and guides them of the different things that they can do. So when you joined, can you kind of just touch on that again? What was the kind of driving factor for you to join the service? Like, what was your calling?
It was mostly, I remembered back, I remember meeting a guy, and this was, I said I was a missionary for my church. So this was northern Chile, and we had a big conference together. I remember I wasn't even in the conversation, but I was sitting close to two guys talking. And one guy was a Marine reservist. He was an infantryman. I know exactly. I mean, he was in the Salt Lake City Reserve Unit, which is, Fox 223. So a line infantry company. And he was talking about being a reservist, and it's just something that, that was the first time I ever really heard about it. And, so later on, like I said, when I'm realizing that, I want to be a complete person, not just, have an 80-pound brain. I started remembering that conversation. I started remember him telling, it's 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. We do this and we do that. And, and he was talking about, the exercises they would do, the infantry training type things they would do, running around the woods with a rifle type stuff. And, so there was a lot of reasons. The other thing that I'll mention is, spending 2 years in Chile, I mean, just made me appreciate what we have here in the United States, and Chile is not a third world country. It's classified as an upper income country. But just to see the drastic difference between what the average Chilean has as far as opportunities versus what the average American has, I mean, there is no comparison, and, sometimes my daughters used to use the phrase, first world problems on a lot of things. I lived in Brazil with them for a while, and they've seen a lot of the world that most people haven't. They've been to Brazil, they've been to Mexico, they've been to, several other places where they've seen what poverty looks like. And they would talk about first world problems. And a lot of stuff that we're dealing with right now are, quite frankly, first world problems. Everybody here has, almost everybody in the United States has food to eat and shelter over their head, and I saw the difference between Chile and here. And I'm like, you know what? I've been taking everything for granted for a long time, so I was actually not a very good student prior to my mission. And when I came home, it was just like, you know what? I have a scholarship. I am not going to screw that up, and I got straight A's through college after that point, and it's just one of those things like realizing how good we have it here gave me the desire to give back in some way, so reserves ended up being my way to do it, and there were a lot of little things that added up to it, but end of the day, I just looked at, hey, we've got a lot of good stuff here, and best country ever. I need to do something to give back and to keep it the best country ever.
So it sounds like the mission trip did a lot for you. I mean, it pretty much changed your thought process and how you see the world. And I want to know, since you spent time in South America on that mission trip, right? Did that have anything to do with you later becoming an FAO, a foreign area officer, and especially
Absolutely.
being in South America? I mean, that's a really unique experience.
Yeah, to be a foreign area officer, you have to have three things. A graduate degree, 6+ months, living in a foreign country or foreign area, and a foreign language. And so, having served a mission in Chile for 2 years, I had 2 of the 3 knocked out. And the graduate degree is waiverable, So fortunately for me, I got selected for the FAO program where they actually send you off to grad school to get the graduate degree. And so what ended up happening with me is when I applied for the Foreign Area Officer program, my application basically said, hey, look, I'm low risk. I already speak a language. I already have the experience you're looking for. I just don't have a graduate degree. I'm low risk, select me. I've already got 2 of the 3 things. All I need to do is go to school. I'll be able to learn another language. I'll be able to survive overseas, pick me. And they did. And they could have assigned me to any region in the world. And fortunately for me, it was Latin America. So I spent 2 years in Monterey, California, going through Naval Postgraduate School, got the graduate degree. And as a bonus, they sent me to Portuguese language class. So learned Spanish in Chile, learned Portuguese there. And then, we PCS'd to Rio de Janeiro for a year. I know it was horrible. It was terrible.
Oh my God.
The beach was just 3 blocks away, and we had to go there a lot because your kids wanted to. And no, it was a good year in a lot of ways. But so yeah, that very much influenced becoming a foreign area officer later. I had a taste of the culture. I understood the culture, and when that opportunity presented itself, that was actually the nail in the coffin. That's actually what made me decide that I was going to go 20 years and be a careerist, is when they put that in front of me. It was 3 years of school with a 5-year payback. So, it took me to my 19-year mark. So I think technically I could get out of the Marine Corps right now with no obligations, but yeah, who does that at their 19-year mark?
Yeah.
So really quick for our audience listening, there are a lot of programs that the military does offer. Hey, you got to take advantage of those programs. You've got to, just like we talk about mapping out your life, right? You can still map out your life while in the military by utilizing some of the programs like Brian's talking about. So that's awesome. So we got PB2 Briscoe in the grad program, right? And he becomes an officer after September 11th. Where does real estate fall in this? How did that happen? Or where did that come from? Around what time did that happen? Can you walk us through that journey?
Yeah. So my dad was a post office worker, so he made a decent salary, decent living. Until I went to Chile, I thought we grew up poor, because, the kids down the street had a Nintendo and we didn't, so I grew up in a middle-class home, but my dad always told me that I had champagne taste on a beer budget. He's like, so I'd always kind of had the idea that I wanted to make a lot of money, and honestly, part of the reason I went into math is because my uncle told me when I was like 10 years old, the people who are good at math make a lot of money. And so I was like, math, there you go. I'm good at it. But I think really, a couple of my friends and I were always talking about ways to make money. And, we're living in an apartment one time. We're like, man, it'd be so awesome to own one of these places because, everybody here is paying $600, and this was like 1990 something, but everyone here is paying like $600 or just many units. These guys must be rolling. But, we had ideas like that prior to, but I think it was really rich dad, poor dad. I was a second lieutenant. I may have even been a first lieutenant. I was on the HSV, high-speed vessel between, I remember reading the book, leaving Okinawa, going towards the Philippines. It was like a 36-hour trip on this big boat, right? And I had Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I had Cashflow Quadrant with me. And I read both of them probably twice, in that time. And that just kind of ignited something. It was just like, you know what? I need to figure out how was the answer, And I did what any good service member would do. I started investing in savings bonds, Why? Because there's a savings bond program. All you got to do is go online, click a couple buttons, and there you go. And I invested in the TSP. I'm thinking, great, this is going to start building things. I started funneling money towards TSP. And I started thinking, that's about as big as I could think at the time. And I started thinking, let's see, what else can I do? I'm like, well, if I stay in the Marine Corps, every time I move, I can buy a house. And so that was my plan. I moved, I PCS back to the States in 2006, started looking for a place to buy. Fortunately, I was in San Diego in 2006. Fortunately, I saw the writing on the wall and, prices and rent points were like back asswards. So I saw the writing on the wall and I'm like, I'm not buying in San Diego right now. So I bought in Utah. And then, a year, that's where I grew up, bought in Utah. A year later, the market crashed. So I bought in San Diego. And I just made it a goal to buy a house every time I PCS'd. So fast forward 10 years, I have a handful of single family homes and, I got delayed by a couple of deployments, a couple of overseas tours. I started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in my Marine Corps career. And what does that mean? It means, the paycheck's going to stop, and not necessarily stop. It's just you make, a certain amount of money as active duty. You get your BAH, you get your BAS and your other entitlements. But your retirement pay at 20 years is 50% of your base pay only, right? So I was going to lose about $100,000 in annual income, and so, here I am scratching my head on another deployment, with a lot of time on my hand thinking, all right, let's start doing this real estate thing again. I was on a ship. It was the USS Macon Island with the 11th MEU. And, I remember every time we had a port call, every time we had anywhere where I could log on to Amazon, I was downloading every book on real estate that was, less than $5. If it was less than $5, buy. And I'd pick one or two books every time that was like 15 to 20 bucks, but I'd go back on the ship and I would just read them and read and read and read. And I had an Audible subscription. So all the books I got on Audible, I'm in the gym, 2 hours a day because that's the only thing there is to do on a ship, and got my headphones in. Everyone else is listening to music. I'm listening to,
podcast. Yep.
Podcast, not podcast at the time, but books,
Books,
just because I couldn't refresh the podcast on the ship, so I'd buy 4 or 5 books on Audible and I'd listen to them. And, I'd go back to my room and I'd sit with my Kindle in my hand and I'd read the books. So, end of the day, I looked at a lot of different strategies. I read books on like the subject to lease options. I read books on, house hacking, on how to use 1031 exchanges, on you name it. I read a book about it. Okay. But I think I started gravitating towards multifamily for several reasons. Number one, everyone needs a place to live. There's this thing called shelter that everybody needs, and number two, it's something that people understand. I understand living in apartments and apartment investments because I've lived in an apartment before. And I'm willing to bet both of you guys have lived in apartments before. All right. So I could understand it. And the third thing is you can scale so much easier than you can with single family. You buy 10 single family homes. It's, 10 contracts. It's 10 due diligence periods. It's 10 down payments. It's 10 escrows. It's 10 of everything. And now you have 10 roofs and 10 driveways and 10 yards. You buy a 10-plex and it's one contract. It's, one due diligence period. It's one roof. It's one parking lot. So there's a lot of, scale involved. So I realized that I could scale quickly, and when I really committed to going, to hitting real estate hard again, I was about my 16-year mark. So it was about 3 years ago. And I realized I had a very finite timeline to be able to do it. So I ended up gravitating towards multifamily. I get off the ship, and I remember one of the books I read mentioned a couple of podcasts, and I literally cut and pasted from my Kindle into like the notes section, my Google Notes or whatever it was. And like literally the day I got off the ship in San Diego, I pull out my phone, get onto Apple Podcasts, and, Michael Blanc, Rod Cleef, Joe Fairless. I remember those were the 3 that book recommended. I think Kevin Bupp's podcast was on there too. Also good podcast, but his isn't multifamily centric. So pretty soon I stopped listening to that one. Great podcast. Just, I want to be a multifamily guy, but, and then it was the same thing. I was either listening to a book on Audible, every time I was riding my motorcycle, to and from work, I had my headphones in and I was listening to a podcast or to a book. Every time I was in the gym, every time I was running, every time I was doing anything where I could put those earphones in and listen, that's what I was doing, and I'd get at home at night and, take my phone out and I'd start looking at properties, so it was just, that was the education phase, trying to figure out, okay, is this really what I want to get into, and understanding pros and cons of everything. So
this right here, guys, is the military journey to apartment investing. And one of the things that you said earlier on that we didn't really touch on was that the reason you kind of pursued the Marine aspect or the service aspect was because you were trying to become a more whole person, a more complete person. And so now you had the education background,
right?
Now you had the service background, and now it was securing that financial background through real estate and other means. Yeah. And so like this is a huge aspect that I think we don't touch enough, not only here on the podcast, but in the service. We don't touch enough on being a whole person, being complete, being satisfied with yourself emotionally, spiritually, if you have it, financially, personally, I mean, there's a lot to it, but it's a beautiful way how you started off one sector and you're gradually building upon this as you continue. And I'm sure you have many more things that you plan to improve on as you continue this journey.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think a lot of times we don't focus on, and I've fallen into this trap many times where you focus on your current job.
Yes.
You focus on being better at being, a foreign area officer. You focus at being better at an infantry officer or an infantry Marine or, whatever the Army calls them, infantry guys, sorry, Army. But, we focus on that because it's what's immediate, and, we miss the forest because of the trees, so, anyway, I think, and I've made a concerted effort to look at a lot of different areas of my life and try to improve those and, work on the person more than making the person better for the job that I'm fitting in.
Yeah, because they actually pretty much run hand in hand. Actually, when you make a more complete person, when you make a just a good person in general, you work on becoming a good person. It in turn breeds a good soldier or a good Marine or good whatever. Sometimes working on just a good Marine or a good soldier doesn't translate into a good person. So
right.
That's a key point. One thing I would like to talk about is on your military apartment investing journey is the actual sequence that you went, right? So you hear the blueprint all the time. We talk about starting with education first, and that's exactly what he did. Started with education, started reading, paying attention to the audible, right? A lot of people out there will say, I don't have time to read, or I don't have time to do this. I mean, listen to what he just said. He reads the audible when he's driving, when he's in the gym, when he's running, all those times that you're not really doing too much, that you're listening to music. You need to be replacing that with stuff that's putting information into your head so that you can then go and utilize that information to, build cash flow or create wealth for yourself. So we started with the education, and then right after that, you chose a niche, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have you said Kevin Bupp, and I think he usually talks about mobile home parks, right?
Parks, yeah.
So you chose a niche. You said, hey, I'm going to stick with Michael Blanc, freaking Joe Fairless, and Rod Cleef. Who all focus on pretty much just apartment syndications. And then you went there, and then you started taking the action. You go online, you're looking at properties, and then eventually we're about to talk about some of the deals you've actually done. So, I mean, that's the blueprint right there. The education, choose a niche, and then, hey, take action. That's what it is.
Yeah, I think out of all those, the action is the most important. Take the action, and you learn more from taking action than you do from reading. I learned more about the apartment investing journey, putting offers out and, talking to brokers than I did listening to 100 podcasts, so you can listen to 100 podcasts about doing something, but actually doing it is a whole different story. So yeah, I think taking action is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, they say the best education is what you learn in the streets, right? When you lose that first deal and that $20,000, that's probably the best tuition you ever paid.
Absolutely.
But go ahead and tell us about your first big syndication, or I'm sorry, your big deal, apartments, right? So what did that look like? What did that first deal look like? And then kind of talk, where did it take you from there? How did it grow?
Yeah, so the first deal, I decided that when I moved to DC, it was 2018. I was looking at the 3-year horizon when I was going to retire, and I realized that I wanted to accelerate. I wanted to be able to guarantee success, so to speak. So I started looking into a lot of coaching programs, and I bought into the Michael Blanc coaching program. And it worked extremely well for me. I had somebody looking over my shoulder all the time. You kind of helping me focus on the right things. I think that's absolutely crucial. Is focusing on the right things. I think when I started, I was getting onto LoopNet, which is the commercial real estate thing, and putting the multifamily filter on, and just looking all over the place. Oh, there's a lot of them available in Memphis. So I'd look at a couple in Memphis, and then I'd look at it again, kind of scroll out. Oh, hey, look, Chattanooga has some. Oh, hey, look, there's some in Georgia. Hey, there's some in Wisconsin. Hey, there's some in Arizona. And that wasn't working out well. My mentor, helped me focus on the right things. He's like, no, pick one area, maybe two, so he got me focusing on the right things. And the other thing that the Michael Blanc coaching program comes with is he's got a huge following, lots of people who are in his groups, so I was able to meet a lot of other people who were trying to do the same thing that I was. And, one of them, Eric Shirley, was very active in, one of Michael Blanc's groups. And I noticed, we use an app called Slack. A lot of people are familiar with it, but in the profile, if you have your phone number in there, it'll show everybody your phone number. So, I was chatting with him a couple times on Slack and, commenting on his posts and whatnot. And one day I just tapped on his profile and he's got an 803 area code. I'm like, that's Columbia, South Carolina. That's where my wife's from. And that was the area that I had decided on focusing on, and was South Carolina. So I called him, or I texted. I don't remember. I texted him or I called him, but we started talking a lot, and hey, we're interested in the same thing. And, a couple of weeks later, we realized, we kept on talking. We realized that we were talking to the same brokers, and we were actually chasing the same deals, and Eric said, hey, Brian, let's not compete. Let's collaborate. I thought, great idea. The entire time, from the beginning, I knew I needed to find partners. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it myself. So I was looking for partners, and, that's why I was networking with people and talking with so many people and engaged in the community as much as I could be, because I was looking for a partner. And he said, hey, let's collaborate. And so we started collaborating. We put offers in together. We would share notes. And at the time, I was talking to 2 or 3 brokers. He was talking to 2 or 3 brokers. And, I was talking to one broker that he wasn't. He was talking to one broker that I wasn't. And so at times we'd get different deals, and would come to the table and say, hey, and would share notes. We'd both do research. We'd come back together on the phone. And, long story short, we finally got something under contract. It took several months and, probably a dozen offers, but we got something under contract. And it was a 55-unit Spartanburg, South Carolina value add project. We kind of looked at what we had between the 3 of us. Actually, I haven't mentioned Brian Mallon, but Eric had already partnered with Brian Mallon. And, when we started talking about collaborating, he said, hey, by the way, if you're partnering with me, you're also partnering with Brian. Turns out Brian's a great guy, very talented as well. So we got that under contract, and we sat down, we started looking at, what we needed to do to get it across the finish line. And, we realized we could probably use a little bit of help with some things and certain areas. And Eric introduced me to a guy named Todd Butler. Todd also was in the Michael Blanc coaching program. And that was the beginning of 4 Oaks Capital. We didn't realize it at the time. At the time, it was 4 guys that were, trying to get a deal across the finish line. But, after a couple of months of, twice weekly phone calls, somebody suggested, hey, let's just commit to each other. Let's do this. Let's become a company. Let's be exclusive. We've been dating for a couple of months. Let's tie the knot, So, and 4 Oaks Capital was born. So I think that was probably the most significant thing about that first deal. Not the first deal itself, but I think the most significant thing was, 4 Oaks Capital came together, and, all 4 of us were roughly the same age. I think the youngest is 39 and the oldest is 40 something. I'm not going to say 40 something's good enough. And, we all have the same goals, same aspirations. We're all making approximately the same salary right now too, so we have the same amount of income that we want to replace. And we're all on the same rough timeline of where we want to get rid of our W-2 jobs. So, I think the stars aligned with that. And so, we got that deal across the finish line. I mean, there's a lot of unicorns and roses on podcasts like this. I'll be honest, it was, a steep dirt path with lots of switchbacks and thorns on the side. It's not unicorns and roses, but, we got it done. And we went on to the next one. So
to that point, real quick, was out of all 4 of you, was that the first apartment deal that any of you had done?
It was the first deal as general partners, so, limited partners for people who don't know, limited partners invest passively. So they provide money. The general partners are basically doing all the work. So between the 4 of us, we had invested passively in a half a dozen apartment deals, roughly 800 units. So different levels of experience, and every single one of us had, a single family home portfolio of some sort. I ended up selling my single family homes off to be able to, invest in my own deals or our own deals. And it's not cheap getting into multifamily. I mean, a lot of people, anybody who's bought a single family home understands there's an earnest money deposit, and for single family, industry standard is about 1% of the purchase price. Well, guess what? It's the same standard for multifamily. So, we had a $4 million purchase price. I wrote a $40,000 check, and that fortunately I had the cash sitting in the bank because we had just sold one of our properties. But, it's something where you need to be able to come to the game prepared, and having those single family houses for 10 years and allowing them to appreciate gave me what I needed to be able to jump in the game.
And so one of the things I really want to highlight there is all of you guys had similar experience levels, similar income levels, similar age levels, and you guys started 3 years ago. So for anybody who out there thinks, hey, you know what, I can't start now, it's way too late. Hey, I can't start this journey now, it's way too. 3 years at the tail end of their career that they flourished in. So it's as long as you put your mind to it and you actually come together and you have actionable steps, you have partners to leverage some of those weaknesses. Maybe you're not the task-oriented guy. Maybe you're the visionary, right? Maybe you're not the spreadsheet guy, vice versa. So that's a beautiful aspect that I think many people have oversight.
Yeah. It was actually 2 years ago that we met. It was 3 years ago that I started started the program, but 2 years ago that we met. It was late 2018 that I met Eric Shirley.
Wow.
And it was 2019 when I met Todd. But I mean, it's once you put your mind to it, and once you get some momentum, once you're pushing that ball, I mean, the ball just starts rolling faster and faster. So there is, if you're looking at the ball analogy, it's almost like that Greek character that's pushing the boulder up the hill. In the Greek mythology, every day he has to push it back up, but we're going to change that a little bit. You're pushing the boulder up the hill at the very beginning, but once you get to the top, you can go down the other side, and that ball is going to pick up momentum and it's going to roll. So there's a lot of heavy lifting getting that boulder up over the first hump. But once you get over that first hump, you get some momentum, and it's easier to find new properties. You've got a track record of being able to close. So now brokers actually want to talk to you instead of, giving you the Heisman. That's probably the best analogy I can think of off the top of my head is, you're pushing that boulder up the hill up front. And then once you crest it, it rolls by itself.
Now, was that the, I guess, decisive point for you, that one deal, that first deal, that the 55 unit? Because we talk about the momentum, talk about, it's pretty tough getting up that hill. And you said it wasn't all roses and unicorns at first, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of things that you learn. But after you got that deal, and now you have brokers wanting to talk to you because they know that you can close. Was that really the, the point that kind of pushed you over the hill, or was it a couple more after that?
That's probably where we were, cresting the hill, and I think from the beginning, one apartment deal is not going to set anybody up for life, make somebody financially free. So we had intended on, purchasing many, I think the goal was, 3 to 4 per year, is what we're trying to do. And, so end of the day, once you have a track record, once the brokers know you can close, because here's the deal. I think a lot of people understand the single family home. If you get on a phone call with a realtor, all right, I don't care who you are, that realtor is going to ask 2 questions. Okay. They might be nice about it. They might be direct and upfront. Question number 1, have you been pre-qualified by a bank? Okay. And question number 2 is, where's your down payment coming from? They're going to ask those 2 questions every single time because they don't want to waste time. They're paid on commission. All right. They're not hourly wage earners. They're paid on commission. So if they can't close a deal with you, they don't want to waste their time. So those 2 questions are their vetting. So if you don't have a pre-approval letter, they're going to say, okay, stop right there, get a pre-approval letter, come back, and then we'll know what we're dealing with. We'll know what your price range is. And if you don't have funds for a down payment, that's another red flag to them. And they're going to say, okay, save up some money, figure out how to get your down payment, and then come back. It's the same thing in commercial. It's the same thing. They're going to ask, where's the money coming from? Okay. Have you talked to some, loan brokers? What type of loan are you looking at for this property? And oh, by the way, where's your down payment coming from? And instead of talking about 10, 20, 30,000 like you would for a single family house, now you're talking about 25% of 4 million. We had to put more than $1 million down on our first close. So the questions are now, where are you going to come up with $1 million for your down payment? And, do you have what it takes to get a loan at a bank? So once you've actually closed on a property, the brokers know that you can amass a large amount of money to be able to purchase, and you can qualify for a loan, and so that's kind of the big thing is once you have that first property under your belt, you don't have to convince the brokers to work with you. Okay. You just tell the brokers, hey, we have 168 units, 4 apartment buildings. We've raised a total of $4 million in the last year. I'm closer to 5 right now, but, we want to look at an apartment building that's somewhere between this amount and this amount. And the broker's going to be like, okay, here's what I got.
And
it's different.
Yeah, I'm gonna speak from experience. You're exactly right. When I have a client come to me and they say, hey, whatever, I'm like, great, show me all those items. And as soon as they close, they now become on my short list. I now send them, they're my pocket listings, email campaign. So that's exactly right. Getting that first one is so crucial because it gives you that sense of accomplishment. It's that belief check, right? That belief result that you said, hey, I can actually make something of this. And it's also your credibility for anybody else in the industry.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I mean, and you wouldn't believe brokers who wouldn't give me the time of day prior to, and there's a couple of them. There's 2 in particular, one of them that gave me a 15-minute, I had to come to his office. He wouldn't meet me. I offered to, buy him coffee or lunch or something. And he's like, no, just come to my office. So I had to go to him and he gave me 15 minutes on the dot. Meeting started at 10 o'clock and at 10:14, he was wrapping up. He never emailed me after that, never returned my calls. Evidently, I did not pass his test of what of a viable buyer, and on the same trip that I was on trying to network with brokers, I called another guy who literally told me I get 20 calls like this from people like you all the time. I can't spend 15 minutes with everybody that calls me, and both of those brokers have sold us deals now.
Damn. And that feels good. Like,
yeah,
that's like motivation. Yeah. That's motivation when somebody like doesn't give you the time of day. And I'm gonna be honest because you're exactly right, Brian. I mean, as a broker, we only get paid on commission. So, we can only give so much of our time. I mean, it just is what it is. We have to feed our families, we have to pay our bills. But that's exactly right. Brian was able to take that essentially that no and take it as motivation, like, okay, challenge accepted. All right, knocked it out the park, and now he's shortlisted on their list. So that's how you guys got to do it, man.
Yeah, and we were very close to closing on our first property, and I emailed one of these brokers back. I just said, hey, you may or may not remember me. You didn't give me the time of day. I didn't say that, but like we met, for 15 minutes back in March. Like since we've talked, we've raised, this amount of money, and we're about a week away from closing on this property. And all of a sudden, he was contacting us. All of a sudden, he was pushing information to us. He was answering our calls. Now we had his cell phone number, and we're texting him. He's texting back. So, that's the difference. And we went from, maybe a bunch of jokers who think they can make it to, these guys are the real deal. They can raise money. They can close. So I'm going to spend time with these guys.
Yeah. Hey, that's an awesome story. Awesome journey. So we talked about the military apartment investing journey, right? So what was your next deal after that? We're gaining momentum now. We're learning. Actually, before we do that, what are some things that we learned out of that first one? We saw not all roses and unicorns, right? So what did some of those thorns look like for you?
We learned that the lending environment can change on a dime, and that was kind of one of the biggest learning points is we were supposed to close August of last year, so actually this time last year we're supposed to close. And if you guys remember, if you don't, you can Google it, but Fannie and Freddie have, lending caps they cannot exceed. They're federally governed programs, kind of a private public venture, but they have a certain amount of money that they cannot go over. And both Fannie and Freddie started approaching these caps, and, President Trump tweeted about it. There was, a lot of articles out at the time saying Fannie and Freddie are dangerously close to their caps. And so what did they do? They artificially hiked up their interest rate by, 1.25%. So we were getting quoted, 3.7 to 3.9% on our debt. And in a very short period of time, that rate went to 5.1, 5.2, so yeah, so it was huge. Anyway, that's one thing we learned is, we have to put a little more fluff in, so if we think we can get a 4% interest rate, we probably ought to underwrite a 4.5, or something like that. And same thing with raising money, the lender cut our proceeds on the first, because the rate went up, it changed all of our ratios, and, when the ratios change, your proceeds change, so, we thought we were getting, 3.3 million in proceeds, and in a week that 3.3 went to 2.7, and that's a big change, so our raise went from, $1.4 million raise to a $2 million raise, and that changed in the course of a week. So, I think the biggest learning point there was, always try to raise more than you think you need. Always put a little extra fluff in your underwriting.
I love it.
So,
all right. So so you got those great lessons learned. All right. You got the first 55 in Spartanburg, South Carolina, locked up. Tell us about the next one, and maybe the next one, and kind of like the journey to where you at or where you are right now.
Yeah. So the next one was actually a smaller property. And like I said, I reached out to this broker and said, hey, what do you got? And we told him what we were looking for. We wanted something, 50 to 80 units. And he came back and he says, I don't have anything 50 to 80 units right now. I do have this little 32 unit that needs a lot of work, and I passed it to Eric. Eric is our acquisitions guy, so we decided that he would be 100% in charge of the acquisitions train. And so I passed the deal to Eric and I explained, hey, I met this broker in March, he's with one of the big brokerages. And this property doesn't really meet our criteria. It's a little too small for us, but why don't you go out and look at it and at least start to develop a relationship with the broker? And, Eric said, fine. He traveled to Columbia. He lives in Wilmington, North Carolina. His parents live in Columbia. So, he went to Columbia, he looked at the deal, and a couple of days later, he got back to me. He's like, dude, these numbers are hot. These numbers are hot. We purchased it for 700, after all the credits, about 750, 32 unit, 750,000. The guy we bought it for purchased the apartment complex for 800,000 in 2004. So 16 years afterwards, we're paying $30,000 less, or $50,000 less.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the story on this one, it was rough. It was at about 65% occupancy. And since we've taken it over, we've kicked a couple people out. It's a Section 8 project-based housing, so, we have to, we can only put, Section 8 vouchers into the project. So basically it was in rough condition. We're renovating it right now. We're in the process right now to get the Columbia Housing Authority out to do the final inspections. And, by the end of the month, we're going to start putting new people in. So like I said, when we bought it, it was 60% occupied. Right now, we're really close to that 50% mark. We've put, a couple $100,000 in it already, and we got a couple $100,000 left to put in it. We're doing the siding on the outside. We're doing a lot of interior work, making it a safer place, exterior lighting, we've also put a fence around it to keep, people from walking through. So, a lot of, and air conditioning is probably the biggest thing. We're putting central air into everything. And South Carolina in the summer, you need central air, and I can't believe people would rent something, in South Carolina in the summer without central air. So, and that bill by itself was like $110,000 for, 32 central air units. But so that's the goal. And, Columbia Housing Agency or Housing Authority, CHA, they're promising us that, as soon as we're through the last round of inspections, that they're going to open up a list of people, and we're going to have, a list of 40 people to try to fill, 15
Nice.
units. So
Nice.
that was deal number 2. So deal number 1 was a portfolio. It was actually 2 apartments. One was a 16, one was a 39. So total of 55 units. Deal number 2 is 33 units. Deal number 3 was 80 units. That was a $2.5 million purchase price. We raised 1.2 and change for that. I think 1.25 million for that one. 80 unit, 72 were physically occupable. You could actually occupy. You could rent them out. And 8 of them, 8 of them were not. You could not put tenants in there. Some of them were torn completely down to the studs. And the ones that were torn down to the studs, didn't have the sink, didn't have like the air handlers or anything else on the inside. And some of them had the copper piping actually taken out. Apparently that's a thing. A lot of people know that is a thing. But so that, the play on that one was to go in, fix those 8 units up. And, we're almost done with a couple of them. We closed on that one about 2 months ago. So, the property manager's been really good at getting those projects underway. We've got a significant CapEx budget. We're going to do the exterior siding. We're going to repair some of the roofs. We're going to add, a playground. It's 80 units and there's a lot of kids there, and there's some wide open grassy areas. And we're like, what would go good right here? A playground, put it in like barbecue pits, picnic tables, make it a little more of a community, landscaping exteriors. And the previous owner had upgraded some of the interiors. I think he'd upgraded 20 out of the 80. So we're going to go in and we're going to upgrade the rest. So bring everything up to roughly the same standard. We'll be able to raise rents, across the board significantly. It was trailing market rents by quite a bit when we purchased it, and we're also taking the utilities that the owner used to pay, and we're pushing that to the tenants as well. So. And that's what most operators in South Carolina are doing right now. If the tenants aren't already paying for it, it's what's happening in the market. So it's not like we're, trying to gouge anybody, but the rest of the market is charging tenants for utilities. So we're starting to charge $30-$40 a month for water and sewer, depending on where the asset is. And, if it's a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom and how many bathrooms, but so we're adding about $40 a month per unit at that complex, just in the utility hike. And then there's a lot of units there that have been rented out for 5 or 8 or 10 years. They just haven't had big hikes, So basically, bringing everything up to the same condition so that everything's getting the same rents. So we don't have 400 in one unit and then 650 in another. But so that was the last one we closed on. We got one more under contract, and that's also in South Carolina, and it's moving along swimmingly right now.
Guys, that's 4 properties, 168 units,
right,
in less than 2 years. Yeah, I was about to say 10. Less than 2 years.
Yeah.
That's insane. That is a military apartment investment journey. I love it. I love it.
So I want to touch on a couple things really quick, right? You mentioned it a couple times throughout this episode, and we talked about the power of leverage, right? So there's pretty much 3 different types of leverage, like a trifecta, right? You can leverage people, you can leverage systems, and you can leverage money. And you've covered all 3 of them, right? We talked about leveraging people. You found your team in 4 Oaks Capital. You got your acquisitions guy doing this. You got you doing this. You got another person doing this. You guys are all collectively working together as one to accomplish one single goal. You probably took a little bit of the military experience when, you brought that together as well, the whole teamwork aspect. Leveraging your systems. You talked about, just like you said, you have a guy that literally does acquisitions, right? You guys have a system in place for how you are finding your deals, how you're financing your deals, and you're staying in one community, which enables you to take advantage of economies of scale that you talked about, right? And then you're leveraging your money. You talked about your capital raises, right? You're doing syndications. So I just think if you're listening out there, as you're doing this, even if you're doing on a smaller scale, when you're talking about just your single families, if you're trying to build a single family portfolio, think of those 3 things. We want to work on our business, not in our business. And how do we do that? We do that by leveraging people, by leveraging systems, and by leveraging money. I think that was phenomenal.
Yeah, and one thing to mention, I mean, we've had investors put, $4 million in with us so far, and we're getting close to that $5 million mark with the raise we're on right now. But the other side of that is, we're offering them ownership. They're getting a lot of the benefits of the real estate without any of the work. So we're doing all the work, and they're getting a lot of the rewards. I mean, we couldn't do it without the money. So it's one of those things where they're also leveraging us, so as a passive investor, if somebody has, 50, 80, 100 grand to put into something like that, they're now leveraging my time and my partner's time because, we have these systems in place. We know how to underwrite. We know how to manage do construction management on the back end. We know how to manage the asset, manage the managers. And for somebody who may want to have the benefits of real estate, but doesn't have the time or the ability, but has the money, that's where they can turn around and leverage people like us who do syndications and get the benefits of real estate investing without having to spend the time.
Symbiotic relationships, the wave going on.
It absolutely is. Yeah, man.
So we're starting to wrap it up here. Got two questions actually, right? Okay. So the first one is, how has your military experience helped you in throughout your military apartment investing journey?
I would say just the idea of this mission accomplishment. I think from the very beginning, every service has a slightly different way of phrasing it, but Marine Corps puts mission accomplishment number one, and troop welfare is number two, and in that order, you accomplish the mission number one. So, I came into it with here is my mission, here is my timeline. There is no other way, there is no option to do something else. So in a way, I kind of burned the boats. I'm not looking for another job. I am doing the transition readiness seminar or whatever it's called, because it's required of me and they're not going to let me retire without it. But, I'm not looking for a job. I'm not going to trade my uniform for a business suit and go back and work at the Pentagon like a lot of other people do. So I think the mission accomplishment thing, works well. The other thing that I would say, and I actually had a podcast episode about this go out just today. By the way, I have a podcast too, but it was funny you mentioned it. The title of it was like Military Lessons Learned Translated to Apartment Investing. But, we talk about the fog of war and how, we are making decisions as war fighters based off of minimal information, and we don't wait until we have, a clear picture before we act, So I think getting used to acting without all the information in a military environment, in military training, or, in combat scenarios is really good for apartment investing because you never have all the information. There's always something there. And you do the best you can to mitigate risk. Just like in operational planning, you do the best you can to mitigate all the risks, get your risk down to a comfortable level or to an acceptable level, and you push, So that's really how we handle our apartment investing is, we get to a point to where we have enough information that we know it's a good deal, and we put an offer in. And once we get that offer accepted, we have a 30-day due diligence period to find out more and more and more and more. So, we're comfortable not knowing everything up front. And of course, we've underwritten, hundreds of properties, so we know what to expect by now. So, end of the day, I think that's probably the biggest thing: operating in uncertainty and just taking action and accomplishing the mission.
Just really quick.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan. Oh no, I was going to say that rolls into. That's what really the problem with Zoom, guys.
Really quick plug for you. It's the Diary of an Apartment Investing Journey. If you are the Diary of an Apartment Investor. Wow, I messed
That's
up.
That's it. Yeah, Diary of an Apartment Investor.
Talks about it. We're gonna talk more about it here in the last thing during the plug. But it's an awesome podcast. He goes over a lot of simple things that I think a lot of people don't know, especially if you're trying to learn. You explain like NOI, explain like what cap rate is, explain all these things that we should know as investors, right? And I think that's phenomenal. But we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike. Just wanted to give you a quick plug.
Yeah, I was just going to say, man, you had a great segue in talking about the fog of war and taking action. And ultimately, the next question is, if you had one piece of advice to give to either a new, let's say a new recruit to the military services or somebody just starting their investment journey, what would it be?
Learn as much as you can and immediately put it into action. That's really the difference between, people who accomplish things in this business and don't, is you have to put things into action quickly. And the other thing is, there's a lot of people who say, I'm busy. I work at the Pentagon, pre-COVID, I was sitting on, a train for almost 3 hours a day going to and from work, so look at the time you have and try to figure out when you can find extra time. I bought an iPad so that I could sit on the metro and actually work on my apartment investing while I was going to and from. I'd save files to the iPad. I wouldn't have, service underground, but, I would read books. I would basically look for every white space in my time, looked at my habits, looked at what I was doing just to be able to fully use all that time better, so learn, manage your time a little better, and take action.
Definitely. That's perfect. Hey, so how can our listeners find out more about you? Can you let us know some of the great things and that you're offering out there, so our listeners know?
So the podcast is the easiest way to learn more about us. It's called Diary of an Apartment Investor, like you mentioned. We have two types of episode. One is called a multifamily briefing, and you mentioned exactly what we do there. We explain aspects of multifamily. The other one is called Ask the Expert, where we bring an experienced investor and an aspiring investor on each show. And, at the end, the last 10 or 15 minutes, the aspiring investor is asking questions. It's basically, mentorship by podcast, so they're asking the experienced investor questions about, what they should do to take their personal journey to the next step. So, I'm really excited about it. Got a lot of, solid reviews, and it's only been out, let's see, as we record, a month and a half, but by the time this airs, you're probably 3 months old. So, by the time you hear this, there's going to be lots of great episodes, and, it's a little different, 2 people, an aspiring investor and an experienced investor on every podcast. And then your website is called fouroakscapital.com. So I think that's probably the best way to find us. If you want more information about the podcast, go to fouroakscapital.com and put a / and type podcast in, and that's the podcast homepage. So listen to the podcast, go to our website, and, my contact information is plastered all over. So, there's probably 3 points in each podcast where I give my email address out. Podcast web notes have my email address. I'm sure the show notes for this one will have my email address, but reach out and contact me.
All right, guys. So look out for Ask the Expert by Military Cashflow coming up. No, I'm playing. It's like we're going to steal that idea.
I've had a couple people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I like how you're doing it. Can you give me some tips on how to do it?" I'm just like, "Oh, all right, sure." But
no, it's definitely a unique approach to it.
Imitation is the highest form of flattery. Yep. So good.
Exactly. Hey, so Brian, thanks so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate you sharing your story and your military apartment investing journey. Just love the whole entire story. Make sure if you're listening to this, go ahead and rewind this a couple times. There's a lot of nuggets in here, especially while you're going through, that you can use for your personal journey as well. So thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I love the military community. I've been in it for 20 years myself. So, very, very happy to talk to any of the listeners out here. Just let me know, hey, I heard you on Military Cashflow, and, we'll start a conversation.
Excellent. Hey, so for those guys out there that are listening on podcasts, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Appreciate that. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you comment below, like, share, subscribe. We really appreciate that. Also, we have a Facebook group. It's an awesome Facebook group, a Military Cashflow Facebook group, where we have a couple, I don't know, like 1,500 or so service members on there that are helping each other build wealth and grow cash flow. I believe Brian's in the group as well.
Yep.
So make sure you can ask a question, and I'm sure Brian will go on there and answer, especially if it's about this episode. So come join the group. It's all free knowledge. We're giving out free game. It's just to help other people out. So
Yep.
Absolutely. And as always, guys, if you guys are in your market, but you're not exactly sure where to start, and you're looking for a realtor out there that understands your strategy, understands your investment goals, let us know, and we'll help you find a broker and pair you up there. We'll vet them, make sure that they understand exactly what your intents are, and then pass along your information. Beyond that.
All right. And with that, this is Dan Wynn
and Mike Glaspie
signing off.